Hello everyone, right, most of you may or may not be aware, as well as doing my drama, social commentary videos, whatever you want to call them. I call them social commentary, but some people call them drama. As well as doing those videos, I also sometimes do books, videos relating to my books and videos relating to my education. That's what this is. For those that aren't aware, I studied at the University of Central Lancashire for a degree in forensic science and criminology, and I studied under several extremely good people. One of them now heads the Leeds department in that area at the university, and this is actually a combination of two things. It's a combination of my husband was the one who got me interested in wrestling. When I was a kid, I was never interested in it at all. Primarily because we didn't get cable till I was in my 20s. But not only that is, I even knew back then that it was fake. And it was blatantly obvious that a lot of it was fake. But that's just my brain. And a lot of the time, there are obviously incidents, some of which I will be referring to today, that have changed the way wrestling is now compared to what it was like 20 years ago. And we're actually talking about an incident that happened just over 11 years ago. And it was a pretty big case. We're going to talk about the case. I'm going to give you the brief overview. I'm also going to give you a few snippets from the autopsy report. And then I'm going to go into the way the WWE handled it and how they should have handled it. So, right, we'll flip back to the incident in question, which is the Chris Benoit double murder-suicide. Now, for those that don't know, Chris Benoit was a wrestler for years. And he was a wrestler, he was originally from Canada. And he grew up practicing with the Hart family, who is a big family. Big wrestling family, and has roots in WWE. One of the members keeps coming back, which is Brett. And then there was the incident that happened with Owen, where he fell off. He was supposed to come down on a rig into the ring, but he had either the rig failed or he pressed his release too soon and he hit the floor and died. Then not long after that, Eddie Guerrero died of a heart attack, and then this happened. When this happened, nobody knew what was going on. Now, the weekend in which it happened, Chris was supposed to be doing a pay-per-view fight. I can't remember the exact specifics of the fight itself. I just remember the situation surrounding it. He was supposed to meet one of the guys who was supposed to pick him up at the airport. He didn't meet his flight, so he rang the guy and said, "I missed my flight, I'll get the next one to blah 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 blah." So the WWE then rescheduled flights and everything was thought to be fine. Then the next day he rang up and he's like, "Can't make that flight, Nancy and Daniel have got food poisoning." Okay, so then they started rescheduling flights again, and then on the night that the pay-per-view happened, people are like, "Where's Chris? Where's Chris?" And everybody's like, and then eventually it came out that after a few people were pushed, that Chris had been contacting him saying, "Oh, Nancy and Daniel are ill," and then on the early hours, I think, of Monday morning, I think it might have been, obviously, I'll leave to a few, there's actually a good documentary by this lad, awesome documentary, which I'll link to, because he goes into a lot of the conspiracy theories that's around this. He goes more into this than I am going to do, and I will also link to a few other things as well. Now, they received a text message, I think it was on the Monday morning, or the late Sunday night, early Monday morning, saying the dogs are corralled in the pool, the back door's open. Obviously quite an anonymous text message. So eventually the head honchos at WWE found out, and one of which was the head of security, who was also a former police officer somewhere. So he then got in contact with the police near where Chris lived, which is Fayetteville, Georgia. And they did what was called the wellness check, which is where the police go and double check and see if you're okay. Now, when they got there, they found 3 dead bodies. Daniel in his bed, Nancy, I can't remember whether she was in her bed or not, and then Chris was killed in the weight room using a weight machine. Now, a lot of people, there are conspiracy theories that Nancy's ex-husband, Kevin Sullivan I think he's called, had something to do with it. That somebody was on the phone to Chris on Friday and heard somebody come in, or somebody try and get in, which is untrue. There is no evidence of that interview anywhere. And the person who supposedly said it has never said anything like that on camera since. There's a lot of people in the WWE that think that Kevin Sullivan did it, but they, and there are other people that say that one of the issues that have since been attributed to this can't be true because blah 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 blah. Anyway, so they got there, they removed the bodies, they did the investigation. Now, on Friday, Chris Benoit killed Nancy in the upstairs bedroom. Her limbs were bound, her body was wrapped in a towel. A copy of the Bible was left by her body, and injuries indicated Benoit pressed his knee into her back while pulling a cord around her neck, causing strangulation. That was on the Friday. On Saturday, Chris had told Chavo that he'd overslept and missed his flight and would be late for the house show in Beaumont, Texas. Guerrero called Eddie back and found that Benoit sounded tired and groggy and confirmed everything he said in the voicemail. Guerrero was concerned about Benoit's tone and demeanour. Calling back 12 minutes later, Benoit didn't answer the call and Guerrero left a message asking Benoit to call him back. Now, Chavo Guerrero is Eddie Guerrero's brother, and Chris and Eddie were extremely close. On the Saturday, is when Daniel was killed. Now, it's his 3rd child and his 2nd son. His other 2 children were from a previous marriage. He has half siblings called David, who's actually a very promising wrestler, and Megan. And Daniel was suffocated and killed in his bedroom with a copy of the Bible left by his body. Daniel had internal injuries to the throat area showing no bruises. Daniel's exact time of death is unknown. The reports determine Daniel was sedated with Zonite and likely unconscious when killed. Daniel's body is also just started to show signs of decomposition, but not as far along as his mother's. Now, a lot of people are going to say, how can you not find an exact time of death? Now, this is one thing about crime shows that really piss me off. You can give estimates. You can't say, oh, that person died at 10 minutes past 4. You can say that they likely died between 3 and 5, or something along those lines. But that encompasses a lot of variables. A lot of variables we are still learning about. This is something I studied in depth for my dissertation. One day I might go into my dissertation, but that would be quite a gruesome video, so we'll see. Now, a lot of people assume that Daniel had Fragile X syndrome, but there was no record of that in his autopsy or his medical records. Like I say, I will be linking to a few videos. There's a couple of documentaries, plus the Larry King interview that happened not long after the incidents, which is before one of the major factors was known. And Chris killed himself either Sunday night or Monday morning by stringing himself up on one of his weight machines and essentially just leaning forward, suffocating himself. Nancy had more decomposition than Daniel, and Daniel had more than Chris, but not that much. Right. Not long after, a small group of wrestlers, including Bret Hart, John Cena, Chris Jericho, and a few others, went on to Larry King Mod, where they were talking about the whole fact that a lot of people were saying that roid rage was involved. Now, just one sec, and just let me get to the bit I need. Steroid debate, that's not what I want. Not what I want. Where is it? Oh, it's in here somewhere. There. Just saw it. Media. Right. There was steroids in his system. I actually have his autopsy report. His autopsy report showed he had a sedative and hydrocodone in his blood. Now, I know from experience, I won't go into how I know this, this is not my place or area to say this. I do know that when you start coming off steroids, it can cause something called steroid psychosis. And I will link to an article down in the description on this, where essentially you've been taking steroids for a condition to help rectify that condition, whether as something to help you fight it or something to subdue your immune system so your body can recover and start working properly. And when they start reducing it, sometimes it triggers what's called a steroid psychosis. Now, this happens a lot more often than you think, but it's not extremely common. It's known, but it's not extremely common. A lot of medicines have these stupid reactions and things with them, and this is just one with steroids. And we do know that around about the time of this event, WWE were tightening down on steroids. It is also worth noticing that there were other signs of steroidal abuse in Chris. He had testicular atrophy, which basically means his testicles weren't in perfect health. His testosterone levels were off and his adrenaline glands were off. They weren't the way they should have been. So there is a distinct chance of a steroid abuse issue with Chris in the past, and if he's just suddenly started reducing them, then that could possibly have played a factor in this. However, I don't think it's the only factor. Now, not long after Chris's death, his father, Michael, received a phone call from a company called the Sports Legacy Institute, who were looking into the damage that multiple concussions can cause on athletes. And they had done tests on boxers and on American football players who had had repeated blows to the head. And they had seen something in them called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I probably didn't get that word right. And it's surprising. And they asked Michael for Chris's brain. And Michael said, well, if it gives us an answer, fine. So he let them have Chris's brain. They looked at it and they compared it from a normal brain, which is lovely, pink and healthy, with loads of little dots where they're supposed to be, under a microscope, obviously, to, and what they found was more along the lines of somebody with Alzheimer's. There was also brain damage, put it that way. Not brain damage enough that would show up on a scan, but enough brain damage that would change his behaviour and change the way he behaves and the way he reacts. Now, is this a factor? I believe so. Most people who have known people with dementia know that they say and do things that aren't the way that they would normally behave if they weren't like that. You know, they react certain ways to certain things, and they forget things easily, which I'm not sure whether Chris did or didn't, but it was always a possibility. So, as a result of them finding this information, it was possible that because of the steroids and because of the brain injuries, that the WWE had more to do with this death than they would have liked. Initially, they did a remembrance episode before they found out what actually happened, and they did a huge episode where they, you know, they interviewed a lot of wrestlers and talked to them about what he was like, and you know, how he was with people and things like that. And then after everything came out, Vince McMahon did an interview, and then pretty much after that, Chris, for the most part, was essentially wiped out of WWE history. When they refer to winners of certain titles, they refer to the correct number, but they won't show Chris's face. A lot of the matches which have Chris in don't actually say his name, they'll just say the people he was fighting. A lot of the games prior to 2007 have kept Chris in, obviously, because they can't do anything about that, but post 2007 there's no Chris. And I think they've handled it in a way that I admire them for handling it. However, in this instance, if it was just that he snapped and killed his family one day and then himself, fine, then yeah, I would understand this. It's like, yeah, he did something bad, but that's what he did. He wasn't in his right mind, whether it was due to the steroids or whether it was due to the brain injuries. He wasn't in his right mind. They have answered this in a different way. While they refuse to talk about Chris in most instances, there is a video from not that long ago where John Cena is actually doing a talk, and somebody asked him about Chris Benoit, and he says, I won't say much on the subject, however I will say this. And I will put a clip if I can figure out how to do it, because I'm still trying to get some decent editing software. I'll pop it in, but if I can, I'll link it up in the icon. He said that the WWE have taken a stance that while Chris was an amazing wrestler and he was an amazing sportsman in the field of his speciality, which is wrestling, what he did should not be celebrated. And we have this thing in entertainment where, perfect example, Kevin Spacey. People are still watching Kevin Spacey films despite what he's done. Same with Harvey Weinstein, and the same with several other people. And people are always quick to, it's like, yeah, but that's, you know, that's only a small part of him. But, you know, they kind of excuse the behaviour. He said, at the WWE, we took the stance of we weren't going to excuse his behaviour, we weren't going to celebrate him in any way because of what he'd done. You have to be able to be proud of your entire body of work and your behaviour and the way you conduct yourself. He said, which we can't with Chris, so that's why we essentially don't talk about him, which is why we don't celebrate him, why he's not in the Hall of Fame, things like that. While I actually commend that approach to a point, that would be a good approach to have if the WWE weren't partially responsible for what happened. And like I said, there are interviews and things like this, but there's like people saying, oh no, he didn't have that much brain damage because the amount of times that he got hit in the head, he had his hand in front of his head. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't dismiss the fact that one of his signature moves was jumping off the top of the ring and headbutting people. It doesn't dismiss the fact that he took God knows how many tables to the head, God knows how many ladders to the head, And then there's the fact that he would literally beat the shit out of people with his head. He had teeth missing, for crying out loud. And people are like, yeah. It's like, yeah, but the thing is, I had one concussion and that knocked me on my foot for a week. But the WWE, prior to this whole Chris Benoit thing, if you had a concussion, you were expected to play. After this is where I do say that WWE did do the right thing. They now have things in place. They do spot drug tests where they test you not only for illegal drugs, but they also test you for steroids. They test you for anything. They have something which is called wellness checks, and basically means you have to be in perfect health to be able to wrestle. Which is why Eva Marie was sidelined for so long, because she was in violation of wellness checks, and then eventually she was let go. That's why Nikki Bella didn't play for so long, because of her neck issues. She failed the wellness checks. Once she was cleared by her doctors, then she could return. It's why Daniel Bryan was retired and then now has come back. He had concussions and his brain was a mess. And then, because he's had, I think it's what, 2.5 years off he had, his brain had started to repair, which the brain does. If you give your brain a chance, it gives you a chance to recover the damage that you had. And he's recovered enough to be able to be passed to fight again, because the damage that he had has reversed itself because he's not been fighting. So they now have things in place that if you have an injury, you can't fight. There are times where people skirt the issue, like John Cena has a tendency to do, like when he did his elbowing. He hid it, because he'd literally just done it, and then was due to go out and do another fight, so he hid it for the second fight, and then he revealed afterwards that he was hurt. Naughty John. But it's one of those things where I do commend the way they act with relation to the health of the wrestlers now, and why, and I do commend the fact that when you are too injured to fight, they will give you other positions in the company, whether it's GM, whether it's sports commentator, whether it's advisor, whatever. They do that now, which they didn't used to do. Before, if you couldn't fight, that was it, you're out on your ear. Whereas now, there are other positions. It's like, look at Triple H, he's pretty much almost retired, but he still works for the WWE because, well, he's married to the boss's daughter, but, you know. And a lot of people are glad that these new checks are in place. And although the WWE haven't publicly come out and said that they agree with what the Sports Institute agreed, Sports Legacy Institute agreed, they don't agree with this, that they've never come out and said that, but they have donated money to help fund research. I'm hoping in a way to help their own people, as well as people from other sports that are involved in these issues as well, because these issues are ongoing. Here in the UK, the most violent sport we have is, other than wrestling, is rugby. We don't have American football in this country. If we do, it's not as popular as normal football, which for you guys is soccer or rugby. Rugby is quite popular. So, but yeah, I do agree with the way the WWE handled part of this. However, I would have liked for them to publicly say that they backed the research of the Sports Legacy Institute, that they agree that they bear some responsibility for what happened, and that they will strive to prevent it from happening again with their own wrestlers, and that they would recommend other wrestling corporations to do the same. That would have been better, because it's like WWE have extremely tight rules, but they're not the only wrestling company going. And the other wrestling companies don't have as tight of a reign as the WWE. Granted, they're not as big as the WWE, but still. And And it's like, yeah, sometimes when I'm watching the games, even though I know a lot of it's fake, there are sometimes something happens and I'm like, But I am glad that the WWE are actually now doing things to benefit the wrestlers, as opposed to, oh, you can't fight, touch it, there's the door. The way they handled Daniel is a perfect example of that. And the way they handled Nikki is another perfect example of that. And it's like now they have people that have had kids, they come in and wrestle now, which would never have been done before. So, all good, to a point. Like I say, if I can pop the videos in, I will. If I can't, I will pop them in the iCard and down in the description, as well as the link to Chrissy's Always Talks report, the Wikipedia pages, and a few other things. As well as reports on the steroids and steroid psychosis. So, with that being said, hopefully next week will be a bit lighter. I am still working on the Easy On videos, but between the hubby being back at work, me being backwards and forwards with physio, and a lot of other stuff, I'm a bit all over the place at the minute. So, excuse me. That being said, stay safe, be good, have fun. I will see you soon.